Have you ever wondered where the diversity of the Brazilian people really comes from? Does the Bible have anything to say about it? Discover the fascinating story of the ancestral origins of Brazilians, according to the Bible. Shortly after the flood, Noah and his 3 sons were tasked with repopulating the world. Could our origins be traced back to them? Let's explore this story that may change your perspective on your own roots. After the flood, the biblical narrative tells us that Noah and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were tasked by God with repopulating the earth. Noah, a righteous man in the eyes of the Lord, built an ark to save his family and representatives of all animal species during the great flood that covered the earth. After leaving the ark and settling back on dry land, Noah blessed his sons and sent them to different regions of the world so that they could fulfill the divine order of repopulation. Shem, the eldest of Noah's sons, is traditionally considered the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, including the Hebrews, Arabs, and other groups from the Middle East. The story of Noah and his descendants is the starting point for understanding the origins of peoples according to the biblical narrative and how these stories connect with the formation of the Brazilian people. Shem, the eldest son of Noah, is traditionally considered the ancestor of the Semitic peoples, which include not only the Hebrews and Arabs, but also other groups from the Middle East. Shem's ancestry is often associated with the region of Mesopotamia and the city of Ur, where biblical tradition locates the birthplace of Abraham, the patriarch of the Hebrew people. The influence of the Semites extends throughout ancient and modern history, with significant contributions to language, such as Hebrew and Arabic, religion, Judaism and Islam, culture, and science. In the Brazilian context, even though the direct connection with Shem may seem distant, it is important to recognize that over the centuries, Semitic genes and cultures were brought to Brazil by Portuguese and Spanish colonizers. These mixtures with Arab and Jewish peoples in the Iberian Peninsula indirectly influenced the Brazilian ethnic composition. Thus, when exploring the origins of Brazilians according to the Bible, we cannot fail to consider the influence of Semitic peoples in the formation of the national identity. Ham, one of Noah's sons, is associated with the African peoples according to the biblical narrative. Ham's descendants were described as those who spread throughout Africa and parts of the Middle East. In the Brazilian context, the connection with Ham is particularly significant due to the tragic period of slavery. Millions of Africans were brought to Brazil as slaves, contributing their cultures, languages, and genes that mixed deeply with the indigenous and European populations. This mixture generated a rich cultural and genetic diversity that is a hallmark of the Brazilian people. The African presence in Brazil was not limited to slavery alone, but also profoundly influenced the country's music, dance, cuisine, and religion. The resistance of enslaved Africans led to the creation of quilombola communities, spaces of resistance and preservation of African culture. Even after the abolition of slavery in 1888, the descendants of Africans continued to contribute invaluably to Brazilian culture, further enriching the diversity of the Brazilian people. Japheth, the 3rd son of Noah, is often associated with the ancestor of European and Asian peoples. According to biblical tradition, Japheth's descendants spread north and west, populating Europe and parts of Asia. When we think of the Portuguese and Spanish colonizers who arrived in Brazil, as well as the Italian, German, and Japanese immigrants who later settled in the country, we are witnessing the manifestation of Japheth's descendants. Each of these ethnic groups brought with them their cultural traditions, distinct languages, and genetic contributions that helped shape Brazil's incredible ethnic diversity. The presence of Japheth's descendants in Brazil not only enriched the country's cultural landscape, but also influenced aspects such as local cuisine, architecture, and festivities. By considering the story of Noah and his sons from the perspective of the formation of the Brazilian people, we are led to draw a genetic and cultural map that extends from post-flood times to the present day. Indigenous peoples were the first inhabitants of Brazil, long before the arrival of Europeans. Their origins date back to migrations from Asia thousands of years ago, when they crossed the Bering Strait and spread across the American continent. Each indigenous group developed rich and varied cultures, with unique languages, traditions, and ways of life. Archaeology and genetics help us trace these origins and point to Asian ancestors who gave rise to the indigenous peoples of Brazil. The ethnic diversity of the native peoples was remarkable, with different groups adapting to the diverse ecosystems of Brazil, such as tropical forests, cerrados, caatingas, and pampas. Their contributions to Brazilian culture are invaluable, including knowledge of medicinal plants, sustainable agricultural techniques, and traditional crafts. Even after centuries of European colonization, indigenous peoples bravely resisted external pressure and kept their cultural heritage alive to this day. The Portuguese colonization of Brazil brought with it a new dynamic of ethnic and cultural mixing that profoundly shaped Brazilian identity. Upon arriving in Brazilian territory, the Portuguese not only imposed their language, traditions, and political system, but also intermingled with the local indigenous peoples. This mixing was facilitated not only by the need for cooperation and strategic alliances, but also by the widespread practice of interethnic marriages. Intermarriage between Portuguese and indigenous peoples gave rise to a mixed-race population that became a fundamental part of colonial society. This ethnic mixing brought with it new forms of cultural, religious, and social expression that echo to the present day. In addition, the introduction of African slavery by the Portuguese had a significant impact on the ethnic composition of Brazil. Millions of Africans were forcibly brought to Brazil to work on plantations and in mining, contributing their cultures, languages, and knowledge to the formation of Brazilian society. The interaction between Portuguese, indigenous peoples, and Africans resulted in a rich cultural tapestry that defines Brazilian national identity. Italian and German immigration to Brazil had a significant impact on the formation of national identity. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Italians fleeing economic and political crises in their homeland found new opportunities for life in Brazil. Settling mainly in the south and southeast regions of the country, Italian immigrants contributed to the development of agriculture and industry, introducing advanced farming techniques and sharing their rich culinary traditions. Italian communities brought with them traditional festivals, folk music, and family values that blended with local cultures, enriching Brazil's cultural diversity. On the other hand, German immigration brought a significant influence to southern Brazil, where they founded cities and communities that still maintain strong ties to their Germanic roots. Germans contributed significantly to sectors such as agriculture, education, and industry, leaving a lasting cultural legacy. Their festive traditions, typical music, and distinctive architecture are celebrated in various regions of the country to this day. These European ethnic groups left an indelible mark on Brazilian society, contributing to the richness of the national identity through their unique traditions. Spanish immigration to Brazil brought with it a unique cultural wealth that left a deep mark on the national identity. Although the Spanish had a more significant presence in other regions of South America, such as Argentina and Uruguay, their influence was also felt in certain areas of Brazil. After the signing of the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, which divided the discovered lands between Portugal and Spain, there were challenges and conflicts over the boundaries of these territories. Spanish explorers crossed the established boundaries and entered regions that today belong to Brazil, as part of the search for new trade routes and territories to be explored. The interaction between the Portuguese and the Spanish in South America facilitated cultural exchange and action between these two Iberian peoples, resulting in mutual influences that echo to the present day in Brazil. Many Spanish settled in the country, especially in regions bordering other Spanish-American countries, contributing their culinary, artistic, and linguistic traditions to the Brazilian cultural melting pot. The Spanish presence in Brazil is a fascinating chapter in our history of ethnic and cultural miscegenation. African slavery had a profound impact on Brazilian society, shaping not only the country's economy and social structure, but also invaluably enriching its culture and identity. For over 300 years, millions of Africans were forcibly brought to Brazil to work on sugar plantations, in mines, and later on coffee farms. This dark period in Brazilian history is marked by the brutality of slavery, which subjugated human beings and deprived them of freedom and dignity. However, even in the face of the inhumane conditions in which they lived, enslaved Africans resisted with courage and resilience, keeping their cultural and spiritual traditions alive. African music echoed through the Quilombos. Dances celebrated resistance, and religious beliefs blended into a unique syncretism. Samba, one of Brazil's most emblematic cultural manifestations, has its roots in the African rhythms brought by the enslaved. In addition to music, Brazilian cuisine has been enriched by ingredients and techniques brought from Africa, such as the use of palm oil in Bahian cuisine or the preparation of feijão tropeiro in Minas Gerais. Afro-Brazilian religious practices, such as candomblé and umbanda, are living expressions of the African spiritual heritage in Brazil. Even after the formal abolition of slavery in 1888, descendants of Africans continued to face discrimination and social inequality. However, their contribution to Brazilian culture is undeniable and is present in every aspect of today's society. Celebrating this diverse heritage is essential to recognizing the strength and richness of Brazilian diversity. Diversity is one of the greatest assets of the Brazilian people, reflecting the blend of cultures, ethnicities, and traditions that make up our national identity. As we celebrate this diverse cultural heritage, we recognize the strength of unity in difference. Each ethnic group that has contributed to the formation of Brazil has brought with it not only its history and customs, but also its resilience and capacity for adaptation. This unique tapestry of European, African, indigenous, and Asian influences interweaves into a vibrant mosaic that defines who we are as a people. As we look to the future, it is essential that we value and preserve this diversity as a collective heritage. Celebrating our diverse origins strengthens us as a society and drives us to build a more inclusive and harmonious country where each individual can be proud of their roots and contributions. May we move forward with the spirit of unity in diversity, recognizing that it is precisely in the multiplicity of voices and experiences that our true greatness lies. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any details of this fascinating journey into the origins of Brazilians, and share it with your friends so they can also learn more about our rich history. I hope you enjoyed this journey through the origins of Brazilians according to the Bible. Stay tuned for more amazing content about biblical history in our upcoming videos. See you soon.